Hey, what's up guys, welcome to FineGap, and in today's video I'm going to explain you with coding example that what is use memo hook, what is its benefit, and how you can implement this in your React.js application. So first of all we will learn the theory and then we will learn from practical. So without any delay, let's start. If you see, I have opened my Paint application. The React use memo hook returns a memorized value. For example, this is your React component. Inside this, you have a function that do some expensive calculation. That calculation may be some mathematical calculation. Just for example, this function contain a loop that will execute 10,000 times. Or maybe, for example, this function render a very complicated user interface. But what you only want to run this function on a specific condition. For example, you want when its parameter will be changed, so then this function will be called. But by default, what will be happened once your component will be re-rendered, this function will be recreated, and for example you are calling this function somewhere inside your component. So each time your this component will be re-rendered, this function will be called, and that expensive calculations will take time on each render. On a big applications, obviously this will create performance issues because you are rendering such a function again and again, which you do not want. So as a solution, what we do, we use memo hook. So on our first render, we execute this function and store its value. Now once our this component will be re-rendered, instead of calling this function again or calculating that value again, we use that cached value. So this time we save our time on each once our this component will be re-rendered. So the question is, if we only want to call these functions one time, why we are writing this in our component? No, you can put some conditions. The use memo hook also get dependencies as a parameter. So once your that dependency will be changed, let me show you. For example, this is your hook, and as a second parameter you will pass some dependencies, maybe a state or something else. So on each component, once your component will be re-rendered, these dependencies will be checked, either it's the same or it's changed. If the dependency will be same, this calculation will not be done again, and this cached value will be used in our this component. But for example, if this dependency will be updated on your re-render, so then the use memo will again call this function to do the recalculation. So by doing this process, we prevent the components or functions of our applications from extra re-renders, and the work that do not we want to do in our application again and again. So this is how we can prevent this. So this was just a theory. In simple, you can see that the use memo hook only runs once one of its dependencies will be updated. So let's move toward practical so we can understand this in a better way. Now you can see that I have opened my app.tsx. Inside this I have a function named app, and this is our simple heading inside this. If I show you the output, we have this output, and on the right side I have opened my console. Now inside this app, first of all I will create a state variable. For example, count. Set count, this is the function that will be used to update our state, is equal to use state, and I will provide the default value to it 0. And now from here, let me remove this h1, and here I will create a div with class main. I have also defined this class in my app.css, which is I am importing here. And if I show you this, so you can see that I have defined some classes to style my components a little bit. Obviously these styling is not related to our topic, so that's why I'm not going to waste the time to write this in front of you. So I have already write some classes. So if I define this class here, it means it will give some style to my element. So now if I create another div with class left and class right. So first of all, let me write my code inside the left. Here I will type h1 tag and counter, and here I will display my state, which is count. Initially it is contains 0 value, so 0 will be displayed here. Now after this I will create a button which says increment, and obviously on click will call a function name increment. I will copy this, and after the here, let me define this function here like this, and each time this function will be called, we will use the set count method to update our state. And here what I'm going to do, I will type here previous count, let me type here PC or prev count, and here what I'm going to do, prev count plus 1, and let me console here something, app component re-renders. Okay, so here I'm going to console that function increment is called. Let me press semicolon. If I show you the output, you can see that we have this counter, and when I click on my button, so this text is, our state is updating. Now if you can see in console, once our state is updated, first of all, once user click on this button, the function increment is called. It means this function is called and which update our states. And you know that in React, once your state is updated, your component re-renders. Okay, so now you can see that whenever I'm updating my state, my component is re-rendering. For example, inside this same application, we have another functionality is we get the input from user and calculate. For example, user type 100, we find the prime numbers from 0 to 100 and we show the user to the output. So first of all, let me write this code, and then I will show you the problem, and then you will we will solve that problem using useMemo hook. So next what I'm going to do here, I will declare a heading which says prime numbers finder, and after this we will create an input of type number, and we will give it a placeholder like find prime number. And let me do one more thing. From React, we also need to import the useRef hook, and inside my app component, let me type here let input ref is equal to useRef, and you know that we use the useRef hook of React for DOM manipulation. So let me press here semicolon, and now I will copy this input ref variable, and inside our input, let me type here ref is equal to this input ref. So now we have create a reference for our this DOM element, and now we can easily get this input with our input ref dot current. Obviously, if you are familiar with useref hook, so you will know the process. And now let me minimize this left sidebar. After this, let me create a button here which contain a class btn hyphen find. I have defined some style in my CSS for this button. Inside this, I will write a text find, and on click, we will call a function get prime number. I will copy this function, and here before this return statement, we need to define this function like this. And but before doing this, for example, we have another state which says const and prime number. Okay, and set prime number, we have this state, and initially it contain 1000 values. Okay, and then for example, we have a function which finds the prime number. Okay, so I'm not going to write that function again. Let me copy and paste this function. So I have already created a function named find primes. Okay, find primes. We give an argument like find primes, and we give a number to this, and then it's do some math and return us the array. Not returns, but let me create an other state like const result set result is equal to u state. Initially its value will be an empty array, and obviously once, let me type here uncomment this use result, and let me paste here. We will use this function to update our result. So what this function do, it get a number as a parameter, it start from 2, and it finds the prime numbers between our given, from 2 to between our given number, and then it create an array for that those prime numbers, and then it set the results to our this result state. So obviously this is the functionality of our this find primes function, and obviously it is doing some expensive calculation. For example, if instead of 1000 we type here 10,000 or 1 lakh, so maybe you will find a delay of few seconds in your application, and if you will increase this number, maybe you will see that your application will be hang. But obviously we are just thinking as an example. uh, so so this expensive calculation function can be anything, can be any expensive calculation. So obviously this is up to you, but this is just for an example. We are doing some expensive calculation inside this function. So now let's suppose once our this component will be re-rendered, we need to call this function as well, find primes, and let me semicolon, and inside this let me put the prime number here. And obviously not here but here where we are calling our function. So obviously initially we need to comment this, because otherwise you will see that our component will be re-rendered infinite time, because each time this function will be called, our state will be updated, and once our state will be updated, then our component will be re-rendered. So this is not what I want currently, but just to show you, let me open my application. Obviously we have an error, get prime number is not defined. Obviously we need to define this function here as well. Obviously we need to uncomment this. So now let me refresh. Okay, we have a counter and we have a prime numbers finder. But now if you notice, if I want to increment my counter, you can see that the function increment is called obviously expensive calculation. So this prime number function in which we have write our expensive calculation is calling. So you can see, again you can see that, let me again clear the log. You can see that I'm just incrementing, I'm not doing anything with my prime numbers, just but I'm incrementing my counter. But you can see that the expensive calculation is doing each time our component re-render, because each time once our this component will be rendered, so we are calling this function here. So each time this function will be called, it will do it math, and no matter how much time this math taking, it will slow down the performance of your application. So what we want is, we only want to do this expensive calculation once our user will type something here, for example, and if we click on find. Otherwise we do not need to call this function again and again and again. So now let me show you. So this is the problem actual, that we have some functions that we do not want to call, but these are calling again and again. And here useMemo solves our problem. What it will be do, it will initially first time our components will be rendered, it will get the results and store them in a cache. So next time it will check either its dependencies will be changed. Now let me directly show you with the practical. So now simply where we are calling this function find prime numbers, we need to create a useMemo hook here, useMemo, and inside this the first parameter would be our function that we want to call. So I will paste this function here, and obviously we need to pass this prime number here as well. Okay, so now you will see that unless our this prime num state will not change, so this function will not be called. Let me show you. We have an error here, useMemo is not defined. Obviously we need to import this useMemo from React first, and then you will be able to use this. So now you can see that. Okay, now let me clear the log. If I click on increment, you can see that the expensive calculation function do not called. Okay, if you can see here. Okay, first of all let me initial refresh, let me do an initial refresh. So you can see that once we refresh our application, the expensive calculation function is called, because as I told you, our function will be called on first re-render. But later once we are incrementing this, in the process of this increment, you will notice that the prime number state will not be updated. So this because you can see that we have to update this state once user will click on this find button, but which is we are not doing that. So you can see that now this expensive calculation is improving the performance of our application. And obviously initially once your component will be re-rendered, what you can do, you can do this calculation and store them in a variable and use wherever you want. But later you know that each time this function will generate the same results. If this function will receive the same parameter, for example 100 as a parameter. So each time when you will call this function, it will generate the same results. So the solution is we simply store those results in a variable, and we check unless this parameter will be changed, which we define here as a second dependency in useMemo hook. So then we again call this function again to do that calculation. So this process will improve the performance of our application. So now in the last step, inside our function get prime number, let me type here set prime number, that function we defined here. And inside this, let me cut this and paste here. We need to use this input ref dot current dot value. So this is how we will get the value that user will type inside this. And so once user will click on this find button, so then our this state will be updated. That state is prime number, and once the state will be updated, the useMemo will again call our find primes function. And once it will call, it will save these results in our result state. And obviously once our state will be updated here after our this button, you can see that I have write some code to display these results. Or maybe let me type it by myself, so you cannot be confused. First of all, we need to create a div with result div. Inside this we need to type here result, but before this we need to type here, so we can write our JavaScript result dot map function. This map function will take a callback function as a parameter. Let me type here e, and here inside this let me return a span element. So first of all we need to define a key here. I will type here e means element. So for example, the first prime, you can see that this result will contain an array. If you will see the logic of this function, basically this will create an array of prime numbers between our given number. So for example, if we give 100, so until 100 the prime numbers will store in this array, and we are saving this in our state name results. And here we are just iterating this state. So now let me type here e as well, and that's it. Now again let me refresh and let me type here 100, and if I click on find, okay, nothing is happening currently. We need to check. Okay, we have do a mistake here. Instead of passing a result, we need to find primes. So you can see that basically primes is the inside declared function that will contain an array of prime numbers that will be calculated from this calculation. So now let me refresh, and obviously we need to define some padding here, like inside this result div we have a span element inside this, and padding would be 20 pixels. So you can see these numbers separately. So you can see that. Now first of all let me type here 100. If I click on find, so you can see that the expensive calculation is implemented. And if I will try to again click on this button, you can see that it is using the same results. So obviously if user try to press this find button twice or maybe 3 times without changing its value, so again we do not need to regenerate these results or recalculate these results. So we can use the old one. And now if you can notice, if I click on increment, let me again click on increment, so you can see that the app component re-renders but the expensive calculation not done. If I click on find button, you can see that nothing has happened. But if I will type here 1000 and if I click on find, so now you can see that the expensive calculation is implemented, and again the prime numbers are find between our given number. So friends, this was the example that how useMemo hook improve the performance of your React application. Again, let me tell you one thing, you need to learn its concept completely. And you have to use it very carefully, because if you will use in such a place where you should use that, and if you will not use, obviously you will make a blunder. And if you will use this hook in such a place where it was not required to use, then again you will do a blunder in your application. So both will make some issues in your application. So this is a very important hook. You need to learn this, use memo, and obviously use callback as well. I hope this video will be helpful for you. If you have any question, you can ask us in the comment section. We will try to answer your question. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel for our regular videos. And finally, thanks for watching.